Okay, here we go again.
Third time's
We
a
need to be
charm.
on. This is Aurelia Davis, Educator's Educator, coming to you with Dr. Candace Holmes, who has some very, very valuable information for us this afternoon. And I'm just so glad to have her here with me. I met her before and just decided I needed more information. So my name is Aurelia Davis, the Educator's Educator. I have been a retired Chicago public school teacher since 2012. And since that time, I have found myself getting back into learning more about what's happening with our children, especially in the neighborhoods of Black and brown children. And so I'm bringing on individuals that have the same passion as myself. So let me give you a little information about Dr. Holmes. Dr. Holmes spent the first 13 years of her older daughter's life frustrated and disappointed. The only recommendation offered to help her daughter thrive while living with ADHD was medication. After successfully using BrainCore Neurofeedback Therapy on her daughter and witnessing her transformation from struggling in school, she started earning all A's, and she decided that this was a time to share this information with the community. And I totally, totally, totally agree with her. So I give to you at this particular time, Dr. Candace Holmes. Hi, Dr. Holmes, glad to have you.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited about our talk today. It's gonna be great.
Okay. What happened as far as ADHD, that's a strong word in the educational process. And while teaching, I remember back in I think it was the 90s. I think it was the 90s because I started teaching in the 80s. In the 90s, parents were encouraged after their child had been diagnosed with ADHD, they were encouraged to put their children on medication. And it got so to the point where I believe there was some kind of government interference. I don't know, I'm just saying. But at the same time, parents were encouraged to put their children on medication. And then at the same time, they were told that if they did put their children on meds, then they would be compensated. There would be some kind of compensation because they were at that time looking at this as being a very serious disability. And so because children were considered disabled, there was funding. So I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly where it stands now, but I know that I had at least out of my classroom of about 28 to 29, there were at least 5 to 6 children that were on medication. And I was sending them down to the counselor's office every day to get their meds, so on and so forth. And it was just so disturbing because they would come back and it was working on some of them and not working on others. And then what I would do is I would meet with the parents on a regular basis to see exactly how this was working. And when we finally got down to the real nitty gritty of it, we found that there were some children that did not have it at all. And
wow.
we found they did not have it. And what we had to do, they had to go back through the resources as far as being, having ADHD and going through the counselors, going through everything we went through, and they had to be restaffed all over again. So what is BrainCore Neurofeedback and how does it work?
Sure. So BrainCore Neurofeedback is a sophisticated form of biofeedback. So essentially what it does is it helps the person who is using it, helps their brain learn how to regulate itself. So there are patterns of being, I'll say, that are healthy and functional and others that are dysfunctional. So typically when the brain is in a dysfunctional state, in a certain frequency, that's when we start having symptoms from, say, focus and attention challenges or, anxious thoughts or depressed moods or things like that. So that's what neurofeedback works to do. It's a drug-free therapy. It's non-invasive. The results can last sometimes up to 50 years in some cases. So it was definitely what I wanted to try with my daughter since it was drug-free and effective. And that's what neurofeedback is. So it can work from children as young as 5 years old. My eldest patient will be 86 this year. And he played football. It's my dad. He played and had concussions, back then. I mean, he played on the last team at Xavier University, our alma mater. And he said, I can't tell you how many times my bell was rung, because there was no baseline back then. It was just smelling salt, how many fingers do you have, and, get out there. So they didn't really, I won't say they didn't care. I'm
Mhm.
just be quiet. Like, I feel like they didn't care. I'm so thankful now. My youngest daughter played softball, and she and her teammates had to go do a concussion baseline so that they would know, where they are, where they were, where they started, and then heaven forbid a concussion happened. And she played softball to see, the changes. So I'm thankful that now, things are getting better, especially with professional players and
Mm.
all the diagnoses and symptoms and things they've heard. But yes, that's what neurofeedback is.
Okay, okay. And so you, with your background in place
Mhm.
and whatever, how did you come to the conclusion or the thought that this could help your daughter?
Sure. So my doctorate is in chiropractic, and we're always taught chiropractic first, drugs second, surgery last. So I just switched it. Definitely chiropractic first. We weren't going to do drugs, and then try to see what I could do in place of the drugs. And so I do understand that drugs exist. I do understand that they have a place in some people's bodies. I just always said, I hope not in my own none of my own children's or my patients. So, full disclosure, if you're on medication, I'm trying to get you off so that once your brain knows how to function well, then you won't need it. So that's my whole goal, is to get you off medication if you're on, and to prevent you from getting on it if you're not on it. So people who come to me don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis. I think we earlier, like I was talking about how, I didn't even want my daughter to be labeled, with ADHD, and that's very well, I think it's getting better now. But back then, I mean, she was 7. I didn't want her to be labeled because I didn't want her to be treated any differently. And I have heard about, back in the day when parents would get some kind of compensation for their children to be labeled, and, disability, whatever. That's a whole, probably another subject to broach another day. Uh, However, my whole goal was to make sure that she could have something that was long lasting and effective and wouldn't have her zombied out. Typically, the biggest thing that people don't realize is that the main side effects of being on medications for, say, focus and attention issues are loss of appetite. And my daughter is thin, and so she didn't have anything to give. And then also, I didn't want her to be a zombie. She had this vibrant spirit and personality, and I didn't want anything that was going to dampen that, because lots of times the personality of the child changes on medication. It's not all the time. It's just, I had a patient who was 14. He said, Doc, I just don't like the way the drugs make me feel. And I said, wow, self-awareness. And then from a young man, I was like, whoa, I mean, so they can tell when they are clear and when they're not clear.
Mm. Yes, I would, those same students that were on medication while in my classroom, and we're talking about third graders. And what would happen is that they would come back, and I really couldn't get anything out of them because the medication would start to take effect. They would get, lethargic, and
Yes.
some of them would sleep and whatever. So I had a real issue with it. And at that particular time, they were not listening to me.
Of course not. Of
They were
course
not
not.
listening to me
You're the
because
outlier.
there was something in place that they wanted to happen, and I couldn't do anything about it. So I just continued to just do my best with those children that I have.
Sure.
But I did find out that coming into like 2000, they weren't pushing it as much. I think there were a couple of court cases in
Oh,
place.
yes.
And they started, and especially when it was happening to African American and brown children,
Yeah,
most likely.
disproportionate rates. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So that basically stopped it, and I got my classroom back.
Now
How
you can teach. Now you
how
can teach.
soon after you started? Okay, it's a two-part question.
Okay.
Did the school know what you were doing with your daughter?
No,
Okay,
I
okay.
don't tell the school anything. I'm gonna tell you why. So going into the next year, I'm like, okay, let me tell the teacher during the what do you call it? The open house. Let her know she's been diagnosed with ADHD, so that, she'll have an understanding of what she's about to experience, perhaps. And I just want to, give her a heads up kind of thing. And she's like, oh yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD too. I was like, great. So she'll know exactly, when she's having a moment, if she needs to just, gather herself, or, anything, any kind of accommodation, because I didn't have her on any kind of, she wasn't on IEP. I don't even think she was on a 504 at that time. And I was thinking, okay, at least the teacher knows. I gave her a little heads up because I'm thinking I would appreciate knowing, what kind of challenges are coming to my classroom, what I may have to, manage. That was the worst year ever. It seems like my phone was ringing off the hook every other day. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is she doing today? And I'm like, okay, that she has, so what do you have in place to try to manage this? Because I understand that that's not necessarily taught, when you're taking classes in education. However, my thought pattern was she's experienced this herself. So surely she knows what the signs are, or when, someone is overwhelmed, or, that was the worst. That was the worst ever. So then the next year I said, okay, I'm not saying anything. Didn't say anything. Everything was working well. And then I got a call like one day. I had put my daughter on she saw a naturopath who's also a licensed acupuncturist. And she put her on with what they call a remedy. So it's a homeopathic kind of little pellets. It's supposed to help, level her out. And so I got a call one day and she said, she's just not herself. And so my mother is a former educator. Well, at that time she was still teaching. She's since passed. However, I always side with the educators because I was a substitute teacher for 4 years, and I understand you don't have time to just call a parent up just because you want to say hello. Okay. So I got on the phone with her. I'm like, what's going on? And I was like, you're supposed to listen to the teacher, and what are you doing? And da. And then something said, wait a minute, ask her if she's taking her remedy today. And I said, did you take a remedy today? And she said, no. And I said, okay. All right. Because I was laying into her. I'm not that parent who says, well, you can't talk to my child. That we need to change that too. But that's another subject for another day. And so that was better. And like I said, it wasn't until she got older. The person told me, the naturopath told me that once her hormones would start changing, then, it wouldn't be as effective, which makes sense. Everything would have to change. And so at one point it stopped working. I'm like, okay, I need something that's long lasting, because this is just not, it's like it felt to me almost like being on medication and trying to find, the increase the dosage. I'm trying to get her off of this thing. I want her brain to just do what it needs to do. And so by that time I put her on a 504, and then middle school hit, and good Lord, the 504 wasn't doing enough. I needed something that was stronger in essence. And so that's when I put her on an IEP. And even then, the individualized education plan, even then I was hesitant because, again, I was like, I don't want her labeled, and then one of the educators when I was a substitute teacher said, well, if she had a physical disability and couldn't walk, would you not build her a ramp? I was like, oh, I said, yes, I would build her a ramp, so I had to put her on IEP, and I was thankful that I did. So she had those accommodations in place. And then when I was going through one of our chiropractic magazines when she was 13, because I had to hold her back in kindergarten. So she was typically the oldest in class because she was immature and couldn't remember the sight words and all this other stuff. And even then I didn't want to do that. So I was one of those, no, no. And so the article said drug-free therapy, non-invasive results can last up to 30 years. And it said ADHD, anxiety, depression. I'm like, what is that? And so then I found out about neurofeedback, called the number, and found out that it's co-founded by one of my former chiropractic professors who was trying to find a solution for his nephew who has Asperger's. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I said, if he co-founded this, there has to be something to it. When you're in class and your peer is just so brilliant, they can explain it, what the teacher's saying better than the teacher can. That's who he was. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, if he invested in this and co-founded, it's got to be something to it. And so, yeah, that's how I bought the system, trained on it, got certified, and had it here for my daughter. And she went from struggling in school to getting A's in honors chemistry and physics, from being socially awkward to having being a social butterfly. I mean, she tried out for the step team and made that, tried out for the softball team and made that. She went from lacking focus and attention to being the most focused in class, because I would ask at parent-teacher conferences, is she focused? Oh, yes, Dr. Holmes, she's the most focused in class. She keeps her peers on task. And I'm like, wow, what a transformation. What a transformation. And I'm thinking, how many other people, would love these kind of results and don't even know about it? So that was my biggest thing. Just knowledge is power. Even if you know something exists, it's better than just being out here just not knowing anything and just hoping for an answer to come through and fall into your lap. And so my goal is to just bring awareness, bring awareness.
This is so fantastic. I love success stories with children. And it's so interesting because as they are growing, things change. As their
Yes.
bodies develop, their brains develop, and they're, you know, everything starts changing. So you
changes.
have to sort of meet them exactly where they are
Yes.
at that particular time to give them exactly what they need in order for them to be successful.
Yes.
So you have basically, how long have you been doing it now?
This is 8 years now.
Wow. Okay.
8 years. And I'm telling you what, it changed our whole family dynamic. My younger daughter is gifted and accelerated. So I literally have yin and yang. And one day she said, Mommy, you don't yell at her like you used to. Like I became a yeller. You know, I've been divorced since they were 2 and 4. And so, you know, I get home from working and, you know, the first thing they say to me, Mommy, I'm hungry. So now I'm cooking and I have to help, you know, my oldest with her homework until midnight every night, you know, and it's just, there's no break. And yeah, I became a yeller. I was tired. So, just that changing that one person's experiences in our family really changed everybody's experience, changed the whole household. I mean, just became a lot calmer and peaceful and, oh, it's life-changing. It's life-changing.
This is fantastic. This is fantastic. Sounds like something that a lot of people might need. And we're with families now that just really have run out of things to do. And then unfortunately, after the pandemic, we turned around and that set up a whole different situation with families and so on and so forth, teaching children at home. And of course, I retired in 2012. And at that particular time, I did not know about social emotional learning. It did not. If it existed, I wasn't teaching it. So how does social emotional learning steps into this also? Because if you're looking at social emotional learning in the classroom and they are basically teaching it to the whole entire classroom, they want it within the whole entire school. But at the same time, we're feeling that this might even be very, very instrumental in some children that do have ADHD.
Well, I don't purport to be an expert in social emotional learning. Look, my cousin is. He just got his doctorate in that. Look, I should have him, Dr. Frame, Dr. Brandon Frame. What I know about neurofeedback and how it helps is just emotional regulation. So we have a lot of people who have patients who have anger challenges, quick fuses. Some of my autistic patients were having those challenges. And then that anger is in the same category, I'll say, as depression. So it can present in different patterns, different ways. I remember I had a patient's mom who called in and she was saying, oh, you know, he's angry. And I was like, oh, I said, that's a depression category. She said, no. So he's angry. I said, oh, I understand. And that's in that same dysfunctional brain pattern that we look at. So it definitely plays a part because like you said, with the pandemic, everything went virtual. It's already, even prior to that, we are having challenges with children who don't know how to communicate effectively with just because they're on their devices all day. So that's one of the things I talk to my parents about too, is a digital detox, you know, an hour before they go to bed, just take it away and then make sure it's not even in the room because, you know, human nature, we want that quick fix. You know, we want to watch something and good Lord, hours can go by. I'm guilty of this myself. I'm working on it on myself. I've put my phone at least all the way across the room, you know, so I have to get up and do something. It's just like, okay, what am I doing tomorrow? Okay. And then, oh, something pops up and, you know, so they have a lot more challenges at this time than we did growing up. And then another thing too, which bothers me, is that children don't go outside and play anymore. Just that sunlight, the vitamin D that you get from sunlight is crucial for mental health. And, you know, I don't have friends. You know, I grew up, you know, in Detroit in the, you know, middle 70s to late 80s. You probably seen reels. They said they had to put a commercial on television to remind the parents that they had children. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Do you know where I was like, wow. And I didn't think anything of it when I was growing up. And I was like, yeah, I'm home. You know, it's 10 o'clock, I'm home. The street lights are on, so I'm home. But we were outside all the time. So we had that interaction. We had that connection. We learned how to communicate. We learned how to accept defeat. We learned how to accept a victory. We learned how to just be creative. You know, like it's lacking now. Everything comes from a device, and that blue light is damaging to the learning process anyway. So it's just so different. It's just so different. And so a lot of times I just recommend just what some people consider to be old school. You know, go outside and play. Leave your phone in the house. You know, it's like simple things. Take a walk. Like if you take a walk, leave your phone at home. You know, it's 9 times out of 10, nothing's going to happen in that hour that you're taking a walk that couldn't wait. That couldn't wait. You know, smell the flowers, you know, feel the air on your face, feel the sun on your face, and just de-stress. Just let things go. Because they have too many challenges now. Just too many things vying for their time and their attention. So
Yeah.
lots of times just settling down is helpful.
Yes, and you know what, and sometimes I'm sure that if you with your patients, do you find that that basically once you bring the patients in, you have to basically work with the whole family also
Oh,
sometimes?
definitely, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, yes, goodness. So the process in my office is, you know, we do a discovery call, which is totally complimentary, and we just talk about some things because a lot of people, this is new. So I tell them, you know, what it can do and what the limitations are. And eventually, if they are a candidate, they get a brain mapping done, which shows how the brain functions. It's a functional assessment. I tell people it's not a diagnostic assessment. So when I give the report back, I can't say your child has ADHD, your child has depression or anxiety. I can say based upon how this brain mapping went, this is how his or her brain is functioning at this time. And so I'll go over the report and the parent will say, wait a minute, I do that. Oh, wait a minute, I do that. Oh, wait a minute, that's, and I just look at them and go, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's typically it runs through families. Like when my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, I asked all my side of the family, no, 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 no. And I'm like, I don't understand this. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. She has another side of the family. And so then I called my ex-husband's cousin and she said, oh, like there it is. There it is. And so, yes, typically I had this one patient who attempted suicide. She's a teenager. And she's one of my more severe cases. And the dynamic between her and her mom was very unique. She would say, Mom, like, okay, like get out. Like you're stressing me out. And I would just sit there like, okay, I have to take a breath because when I grew up, we could not speak to a parent like that, you know, and I'm just like, so I have to, you know, take a back seat. And so then the parent like, okay, you know, and she left and I said, so what's going on there? So she stresses me out. You know, she's always over me and, you know, this, whatever. And I'm like, oh, and then like, with that particular patient, soccer was coming up. And so it was time for soccer season to begin. And the mom was concerned that she wouldn't be able to get as many sessions in, you know, with my therapy when soccer began. I said, nope. I said, she's going to play soccer. She's going to go to practice. She's going to be a teenager. She's going to be with her friends. She's going to learn how to train for something and look forward to something and move her body and be active. I said, that's what we want. We want her to experience that, how working in team, you know, affects everything else. That that's part of learning how to be in this world. You know, it's like one thing I would tell, the sun doesn't rise and sit on your behind. You know, there are other people to consider, you know, so I love team sports because it gives you that. I understand other sports do that too. I just feel like team sports are a good way to go. And so allowing her to have that opportunity to play the sport and to go to school and to do the therapy, her whole life turned around. I mean, her mom called me up one day and she said, well, she's just rolling her eyes and sucking her teeth at me. And I said, like a typical teenage girl. I said, isn't that, you know, better than the alternative? And she said, oh, yes, it is. I said, okay, because you know, adults, we are in our adult brains, you know, so no, this is a good thing. Happy children typically, you know, have different results than those who are having some challenges and think that life would be better without them being here. So I was just so thankful that, you know, she was getting back to herself.
That's good. That's very good. Now, if families want to get into this and with Obamacare and all these other cares, okay, what kind of insurance is available to them if they, you know, want to?
Sure. So at my office, we accept health spending accounts, HSAs, and flexible spending accounts. So typically this is a self-care service. Don't get me on my thing about
I know.
Sometimes companies would rather have you be a lifetime customer rather than have a solution that, you know, so I'll just leave it at that. Like, I'll just leave it at that. My whole, what I love about neurofeedback is that it is a solution that can last for years. And under some cases, up to 50 years. And it's like I tell my patients, I said, let's say it just lasts 5 years. Isn't that worth it? Have my life change in 5 years? 5 years from now, I'm better than I was today. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. And what drug will give you that kind of result without side effects? I've not come across one yet.
I have been hearing lately, and this just seemed to be these individuals that had ADHD as children are now having ADHD as adults.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What does that look like?
So ADHD for adults is typically a little different because they've learned how to cope. They've learned how to manage it. So it can be hidden and not as obvious as adults because they've learned some coping mechanisms. So again, let's say, you go from 15 to being 35. Again, like we said, so now your hormones have changed. Now you may be married. Now you may have children. Now you may have a job that's a little more strenuous than when you started, say at 20 years old, because you've gotten promotions and raises and things like that. So now you have more on you. So now you have more projects to complete and less time to do it. And guess what? Typically, organization isn't something that adults with ADHD or children with ADHD possess, along with the executive functioning skills. So it can look like, as a book said, looks like crazy on an ordinary day. It's just very challenging. I've had adults contact me afraid of losing their jobs because they're not able to focus long enough to keep up, afraid of that compounding and losing their spouses, and getting a divorce because now they're not able to earn the income because they're having these challenges. And some of them are to the point where, like you said, they've tried everything and they just want something that's going to last. And it's very successful with patients who grown up with ADHD. And then conversely, it's like this. So I had a mom who contacted me because their son was diagnosed with ADHD, and the dad was like, "Well, I did without that, and I turned out okay." And the mom was like, "So when can we schedule?" Because she knows, and has to save face in front of her husband. And at the same time, sometimes people can be a bit reluctant and stubborn, and again, that's human nature. So sometimes as adults we feel like we've gone through something, so then if our children go through the same thing, then it'll make them stronger. And at the same time, it just reminds me of, if you know better, then don't you want to do better?
Yes.
Like when my daughter was, like I said, I was punishing her. I'm a cafeteria Catholic. I went to Catholic school 1st through 8th grade. There was an order. You did what you were told. None of this. I don't. You just did. You performed. And so when my daughter wasn't performing, I'm like, what is going on? Why are you being so lazy? Is what I would call her. Like, why are you late? And then come to find out, she couldn't help this. This is just how her brain was functioning at that time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've been disciplining her, and this is something that she can't help. In our community, typically you don't have ADHD, you need to be more disciplined with your child, and that's not always the case.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're going into this, beside working with the brain, do you find yourself tapping into a diet?
Oh, absolutely.
And things like that?
Absolutely. So I'm from Detroit, so we call it pop. Most people down here call soda.
We call it pop too.
Yeah, we call it pop. I'm like, soda, but notwithstanding. So Coke is very good Lord. This is the home of it, in Atlanta. And I just remember seeing the demonstration of it being able to take the rust out of the old washing machines and dryers. And I'm like, okay, so if it can remove rust and even the little debris on top of a car engine, and what is it doing inside your body? Like, I just, so yes. So the best kind of foods to eat for your brain and brain health is the Mediterranean diet. So a lot of vegetables and fruits and fish, as opposed to the red meats and just all those, trying to stay away from those preservatives and those dyes. And a lot of times we're so used to having a certain thing that we eat and wonder why our kids are how they are. Well, kids eat what you eat. So a lot of times I have to make sure that the parents demonstrate making healthy choices, drinking the water instead of the pop or the soda, going on a walk or walking upstairs, or downstairs, get that blood circulating, which, goes to the brain as opposed to taking the elevator all the time. I went out to dinner with a friend yesterday and I said, well, let's walk up the stairs. And he was like, I said, let's walk up it's one flight. Like, like, come on, he's like, okay, so we're walking, any time, but again, they model that with you, like I walk at least 3 times a week, weather permitting, with my neighbor. And I like that my children see me doing that. I'm not just, okay, being inactive, because that's part of it too. Yeah. There was a study that showed that people who walk briskly live an average of 21 years longer than those who don't. And so being from Detroit, I moved down here and I'm going to class. And when I was in chiropractic school, and I'm like, oh my God, come on. And they were just they're sauntering, and I'm like, we have places to go, things to do, people see, decisions to make, like, let's go. And then I read that study and I was like, there you go. Like my dad is, like, he'll be 86 and he's one of those brisk walkers, so that's what I, grew up doing. So it's important to stay active. It's important to drink your water. It's important to eat healthy and well. It's also important to get your sleep. A lot of us are sleep deprived, and it used to be 8 hours. Now it's 7 hours. Like, we're happy if you can get 7 hours of good quality sleep. That affects everything too. It's like your brain is, we would call it a supercomputer. So what happens if you don't shut your computer down? You don't shut your phone down. I don't know what's wrong with it. It's just not. My brother works at a communications company, and he said the first thing that he asked is the people that call in, says, when was the last time it was shut down? And he said on average it's like 377 days or something since it's been shut down. He's like, okay, shut it down. Start it again. And voila, it works. It works well. And so again, getting the devices out of the reach of the children and adults, at least an hour before bedtime will decrease the blue light. Reading. Like an actual book. I don't have my book in front of me. I've written a book. It's coming out soon too. It's called Transform Your Brain with Neurofeedback, Restore Your Focus, Reduce Anxious Thoughts, and Revitalize Depressed Moods. So reading a physical book where you can turn the pages right before you go to sleep is much better than reading something on, your device, as far as brain health is concerned too. So it gets your brain into the right mode. You have heard people say, well, I fell asleep reading a book. Great. Yeah, I'd rather you fall asleep reading a book than fall asleep with the phone in your hand.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So those things.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm thinking after I retired, well, it seems like longevity runs in my family. I want to run in your family too.
Yes.
Yeah, my mom's sister is 95. Yeah. And her baby sister is 89. But what is interesting, and my mom lived to be about 86, but then the dementia came on. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, me reading, I should check with you, but basically looking at that as far as older adults and seniors and whatever, keeping that brain motivated, and doing, just a little bit of everything, like what we're doing now.
Yes.
Is going to help. What do you think about that?
Well, so I'm so glad that you brought that up because my mom was still with us. She would say, well, I do crossword puzzles. I said, Mom, that's knowledge you already had. I said, you have to do something that you've never done before. Like the best advice that I can give, the best way to prevent mental decline is dancing. Find some new dance and the latest hustle. Good Lord. I went to a friend's birthday party and there like 12 songs came. Everybody just getting up and rushing. I'm like, I don't know that one. Like, what is that? What is going on? I remember going to a wedding and my next door neighbor from Detroit got married and the wedding was in Texas. And the day before, like her bridesmaids and I are all in the Airbnb in front of the TV trying to learn the Tamia hustle. I said, because I got to get this for her. I got to get it. So when you learn, so you form new neural pathways when your brain is learning something new, and then it's fun. So when you get extra points when you do something, when you improvise. So that little thing you do or you drop or something, you do a split or something. It's like, hey, there's something new. Ooh, so just think of your brain has electrical activity in there. So just think about all your brain just being on fire because now you're learning something new as opposed to doing nothing. And then, so that also gets the circulation going when you're dancing. So that helps too, to get the brain, the fresh blood. So lots of times if you stay stagnant, if you're not moving, if you're not learning anything new, well, then that's how your brain is going to react. Because it's like, oh, I guess there's nothing to do today. So, okay.
Would
So
you find that basically ADHD has a tendency of running more in males than females? Or is it sort of a balance?
that's, it's balanced. I just think girls tend to mask it better because they tend to be better communicators. And so it's my theory, because my best friend has two boys and I have two girls. And when we meet up, you know, the boys like bouncing off the walls and my daughter's just sitting there and I lean over to her and said, and you wanted a girl. And she said, you wanted a boy, you know, so we come out differently. We just come out differently. So I think the hyperactivity shows up earlier in boys than it does in girls. And again, my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, and you wouldn't see it as far as the hyperactivity. Like it was normal to me, you know, it was not normal, average to me. Let's say, I want to say normal, it was average to me. And then her sister came, and I was like, oh, you know. So I think it may be catching up. And then also one of the things that is a challenge, I know when I was growing up, we had differentiated instruction, you know. So just because a child has ADHD doesn't mean that they're struggling in school. They can be the most brilliant person out there. And I've experienced that with plenty of my patients, and they get bored because they already know the material. So now they're like, okay, what else can I do? Let me get up. And I know when I was a substitute teacher in middle school, a lot of those advanced classes, those gifted classes, they had to have a book to read.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, I had to have a book to read. So guess what? If I finished my lesson, I better take that book out and start reading. You know, so that was the difference. So I was thinking, wow, all those things that I learned growing up still rings true today. The brain still develops at the same rate. So, you know, let's go back to some of the things that we know are true. Just like when you come across a word that you don't understand, guess what? You look it up. You write it down, write the definition, write in a few sentences, use it 3 or 4 times the next day so that it sticks. Those same lessons still ring true today. So those are great ways to prevent the cognitive decline.
Right. And it makes sense for the simple reason that teachers are now, well, I'm going to be honest, I was an old school, so, you know, so sit down, throw your hands, you know, I had to get out of there. I found that there was a new generation of child coming
Yes.
through. And what we did is that, yeah, we had the differentiated instruction. We had all kinds of different things that people think up and get paid for. Let's put it that way. But in the meantime, yeah, what ended up happening is that I got heavily into groups. I got the management to the point where the children knew how to manage themselves. Second graders, third graders, preschools, all of them know how to manage themselves if you teach them how. And so that child that might have had like ADHD or may have been a little hyper or Asperger's, I did have a child that did have Asperger's, you know, so we knew that child. In fact, that child was given an aid, you know, they were allowed to give him an aid, and they would take him to the gym and let them just run it off.
Yes.
So on and so forth. So I think, but believe teachers, good thing about it, teachers are doing this now, but at the same time, they do need to realize children within their classrooms are different as far as having different abilities, cognitive abilities going on. And you just can't put every child in one box.
No.
And so from what I'm understanding, they are not doing as many IEPs as they used to, because they're taking each child individually. And so in the meantime, I'm bringing up this question: what have you been able to, or are you allowed to tap into any school systems to let them know about this, or are you considered a resource?
I'm considered a resource.
Okay.
Typically, like I've tried to get into some different schools to let them know that typically the private and specialized schools are a little more open than the public schools.
Yeah.
And so that I found that to be interesting. I went to a private school through 8th grade, and in public school, you know, from then on. Even when I was in chiropractic school, there was a person who he was going to be a chiropractor, and he was smoking marijuana. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, dude, I said, you're about to be a doctor. Like, what's going on? He was like, look, he said, I have ADHD. He said, and when I was growing up, my mom used to chase me around the house with a syringe. I guess it had the, and she would, she finally chased me down, and then, and he said, I just go limp. He said, so this is the only thing that I can do that can keep me level. And I'm like, wow, like I never thought of it like that, because that's not been my experience. And a common mistake people make is thinking that once their child leaves their house, if they're going to school, college or whatever, that they're going to stay on those prescribed medications.
No.
Once they're not under your watchful eye, the chances of that are slim to none. So why not get a handle on it now and get their brain to get transformed and changed before they go away from you with a solution that helps and is long lasting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's it's, and you know what we need and what we're able to get is just so hard. It's just
Oh my goodness.
hard, Let me ask you this. How does bipolar fit into
So there are now different levels of bipolar,
okay.
and that is like layers to it is what I should say. So that falls in the anxiety and depression category. So what the brain mapping does, what I love about it, is that it focuses on the areas of the brain that need to be addressed first. So the primary, then the secondary, and then the tertiary. Like I had a patient bring her son in, and he was diagnosed with dyslexia. And so that's considered to be a learning challenge. And the mapping came up that anxiety was higher than the learning challenge. She's like, no, let's get the dyslexia. I said, no. We have to focus on the anxiety. That's number one. Exactly. That's number one. There are levels. Like my daughter, her primary was ADHD category, and then anxiety, and then depression. So she was a severe case because she had it all across the board. And so he started working with me in my program, and then his dyslexia got better because he was no longer anxious about, so I was like, aha, she's like, oh, okay. So sometimes, and again, that's that label. She's like, okay, this is dyslexia. Like I gotta do this. And instead of being open-minded and knowing that, we are a complete person. So just like chiropractic, focuses on the nervous system. Most people think, we're just cracking bones or something, but they don't know that we're focusing on the nervous system. When the brain is getting those signals out to the rest of your body without any interference, then that's lovely. And that's why I was able to add neurofeedback to my practice, because guess what? The brain controls everything. You can get everything going here, and then all the signals and all the impulses that go out to the rest of the body are, first of all, able to get there because there are no interferences with spinal misalignments. And the signals are, at their peak, at their optimal levels in the correct frequencies, then guess what? Like the world is your oyster.
Yeah. What's the earliest age parents should be able to look and see is if their child is having some issues with ADHD?
Well, typically, I think parents have a bit of a sixth sense, and with all these milestones that they're hitting, they're much earlier. As far as our office and typically BrainCore in general, neurofeedback in general, we start with them as young as 5 years old. They have to be able to sit and be, relatively still during the brain mapping. Unless, like some cases, I've heard some practitioners, some of my colleagues have been able to work with children as young as 4. However, they have to be a very mature 4-year-old, and there are some that exist. Not a lot, just not many. It's like just not many. So that neuroplasticity, the brain's able to learn new ways of being and adapting and changing, at all ages. They're sponges when we first get here. So anytime you see something that's a little different, then look into it. Okay. Look into it. It's like I tell people all the time, I always wish that I'd have known about this when she was diagnosed when she was 7. And at the same time, I wasn't ready for it when she was 7. I was still in denial. So it wouldn't have helped me at all. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Whatever. At 13, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Let's see what can we do? Because I had 13 years of a challenge. It was a struggle for the entire family. So most people think that, just the child is struggling, but that affects the whole family dynamic. You have some children who are doing well and they don't need as much attention and redirecting and just help as others. And it's like I tell people all the time, I'm so thankful that my youngest daughter is able to, she had those regulation skills already. She was able to do everything because it was just me. I didn't have the capacity or the energy to divide my time to her as much as I would have liked, because I was focusing on getting, my daughter, my oldest daughter together, her sister together. And so I'm thankful that they're both thriving now. All is well. Let me say that. All is well. Very thankful. They both ended, let's see, first semester of my oldest daughter's for sophomore year, she was on the president's list, second semester dean's list. My youngest, she got president's list both semesters. And that was her freshman year. So they're doing extremely well. And I don't have to help anymore. Lord have mercy. Not helping with homework. Ooh, that is a gift in itself, because 25 years of schooling is more than enough for me. Look.
My goodness, I feel we have covered everything, but I know you have more to give. Can you put your information? I have seen your videos and whatever. I'm impressed. I said, I know that lady. I know that lady. And because it's, as we go on and as things get more difficult, especially for parents, they need to know. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the school systems are not offering as much. Their hands are sort of tied. Their hands are tied. And then when we did go into those IEPs and everything, for us to even get schools now where they have a social worker, a psychologist, and all of those resources in the building, and not having to wait 2 and 3 weeks for the psychologist to come back or the physical therapist to come by and give the child these parents are going to have to reach out and just get the resources on the outside so that their child, and not just leave it all up to the school. That's what I'm saying.
No, we have to be proactive. That's with anything, any kind of health. You're proactive with your physical health, be proactive with your mental health. That's the whole thing. If I knew then what I know now, things would have been different. But we are here now. It's like I say, you do the best you can with what you know and what you had at that time. And now that you know that other things exist, I mean, why not try something else? I am so thankful that my daughters are both drug free, and people say, oh, goodness, it's a drug. That's what it is. It is a drug. I think one element is missing from, I think it was Ritalin at that time. I'm not sure if it's the same with Adderall. It would have been in the same category as cocaine. So yeah. Let's keep the babies and the adults away from as much medication as possible.
Is there a network in place across the states?
So,
or is that's up for you to do?
Listen, so the therapy that I provide, you don't have to be in the state of Georgia. Mine is a national program. I have a national practice. So I'm so thankful for that, because I'm able to ship the units for my patients to perform the therapy at home. Everyone's busy nowadays. So I'm thankful for that. If they want to do a session at 8 o'clock, at night, guess what? You have to worry about traveling to my office or flying in. You can just open up your computer and perform the therapy. And I monitor them remotely. So I'm very thankful for that. So I have connections and colleagues all over the nation with whom I work with, so that we partner together to help as many people as we can.
I think last time you and I talked, I mentioned to you Parent University.
Yes.
There's a national parent university that's out there. And the good thing is it started in Savannah, Georgia. And
look at that.
Conference. Yeah, we went to a conference back in, I think it was like January, February. I know we went when it was cold in Chicago, and we went there and it was warm. But in the meantime, that I see this as a terrific platform to do, because what they do, and you can basically go online and find it. It's called National Parent University, and we have one in Chicago. But like you were saying before, the difference between it being national and overall for everybody, and not hooked up to public schools, is different than having it, whatever. So these particular parent universities, what they do is they have like conferences. I think like 3 times a year or something like that. And people come in and talk to parents exactly what you're talking about.
Well, that's exactly what that's what I'm hoping to do, especially with my book coming out, and to use that as a platform too, to just start the conversation.
Yes.
You can't help what you don't know about, so just having that opportunity just to share what I've learned and the experiences that I've had. And that's why I wrote a book about it, because most people don't know what neurofeedback is, what it is, what it can help, how it helps. And I've had people say, oh my gosh, are you going to shock my child? Like, No, it's not shock therapy. I wouldn't do that with my own child. Are you going to inject anything? No, I'm not going to do that. Didn't do that with my own child. So we only do at our office what we've experienced ourselves, so that's something, I'm here to help and to serve. That's those are my goals. So yes, the more people that know about it, the better off I think society would be. Again, it's life-changing stuff. I mean, just think about all the people who may not, who could get off medications, who will be able to thrive and just change their whole family dynamic, because, there are a lot of people who've had experiences where they've been, experienced abuses or traumas. And, sometimes those mental health challenges stem from those experiences. And so medication just like dulls them and numbs them out to help with, to help cope with what they've had. So that's why I always let people know that I have wellness affiliates. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist. So I tell people all the time, look, I said, if you are having a challenge, don't call me, call your person, call your counselor, call your therapist, call your psychologist. They are trained. I am not. I would tell you not to do that. And that's not very helpful. So I collaborate with other physicians, just knowing that, I don't know everything and I don't purport to. And so I love that I have the support of those. I get, quite a few referrals from psychologists as well, and therapists, just because we're all here to work together. If we can all use the skills that we've learned and cooperatively, we can take on the world.
We can. Well, Dr. Candace Holmes, you are my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I have enjoyed this. You put your information down in the chat.
Yes.
And like I said before, on the level of, because I attended another, I think the ASCD conference or something like that. Yeah, that's basically working with like preschools.
Okay.
So I'm going to reach out to you because I've seen these type of presentations done at these type of conferences where people are traditionally connected with children, and it's not necessarily public. It's basically private and so forth. So I'll basically be reaching out and sending you some information, but it's definitely the Parent University. They do have a website.
Okay.
And the man that started is a brilliant guy and whatever. And he basically thought that it's just like children attend school, parents should attend school.
Oh my goodness.
Learn how to be parents. Yeah, to learn how to be parents, how to work with your child at home and things. And, he's been doing a whole lot lately because of after the pandemic, because that left a lot of our parents just basically like,
Listen, I was waiting for all the teachers to get their $1 million raises after realizing that their children aren't those angels all day long like you think they are when you send them off to school. I was waiting for that, but unfortunately that did not happen.
That didn't happen. No.
But yes, people with conditions either got worse, or those who didn't, they developed them. So it's time to have a different story and a different outcome for sure.
Yeah. So this has been fantastic, and you and I are going to get together. When does the book come out?
The book is coming out July 16th. And so, yes, I'm working on getting all that together and gathering reviews and everything else. So just excited about it. And I wanted to share too that I have complimentary discovery calls, so people can book with that on my website. It's bookwithdrh.com.
Okay, so can you put that in the chat then?
It's in the chat right now.
Jay will basically get all of that information out, and oh my goodness, this has been fantastic.
Thank you so much for providing a platform just to share what I've learned. I appreciate
and you know what? It's something that is needed, because we need to connect, teachers, and we have at the point we need to reach out. What else is available to me?
Exactly.
You go through your principal, well, Miss Dr. So-and-so, such and such and such is happening in my room, blah, 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 blah. Well, we only have such, our funding is so and so, and we don't get it. And I don't want to hear all about all this.
No. Let's cut to the solutions.
I need to know how to work with these children that are in my classroom. And right now I see where they need more than me teaching them ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Well, and there's a big difference too. And the parents, of the children, because it's like my mom was trying to figure out when she wanted to retire. And I remember she said that a child asked her, why does she care? And I said, yes, Mom. I said, I think it's time for you to retire. I said, because you've gone and had generations of people who understood that teachers care. Like, they want you to be successful. They want you to learn everything. They want you to gather the skills and perfect them and thrive so that you can move on to the next level. And anytime a child is wondering why you care, that's a problem. And they don't see education. Some of them don't see education anymore as the way out. Oh, well, Mark Zuckerberg, didn't go to college, or, and I understand it's not for everybody. I say that. And another thing I say too is that Mark Zuckerberg was accepted and went to Harvard.
Right.
So let's see, he had the mental abilities to get him there. And so whatever it is you decide to do in life, I always say, do it to the best of your ability. If you want to be an electrician, doggone it, own the best electrical company that you can nationwide, hire everybody else. That's fine. Just make sure that you put in the work for it, because nothing, very rarely do things come easily. Let me say that, very rarely, very rarely. So yes.
So this has been a joy. I'm glad we finally got it together.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So put your information in there, and I'm definitely, is your book going to be offered? What platforms are going to be offered?
It's going to be on Amazon so far, and then eventually on my website too, which is braincoreofduluth.com. So we're going to get that together. Okay. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Is there a network in Illinois that you know of?
I will have to go on our national site to see, because like I have a patient that's in, and I do have, actually, I think there was one there, because I have a patient who's starting up that's in Minnesota.
Okay.
And the closest one was in Illinois rather than there. So I have a lot of people who, I got a person who was in Alabama, and I said, there's someone close to you. She said, no, I want to work with you, Dr. Holmes. So she drove 3 hours to the offices, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's good.
Like, okay.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you.
You know what? When you tap into this, people of color, very, very leery. We get very, very leery because we grew up.
Oh, yes.
A lot of the information, how they used, what used to happen, if you had somebody
and everything else. Absolutely. And conversely, I've had people of color contact me and said, I was most excited because you look like me.
Yes.
Or you look like my cousin or my aunt, or I tell people, look, I get it.
That helps a lot. That helps a lot.
Yes, I got honors in history, 8th grade, high school, and college. So
fantastic.
I get it. I get it.
Good for you.
Not a history buff. Not a history buff. I did well in it. Not that I love it. I say, hey, you know what? It's a gift God gave me. Let's stick with it. Let's just get it.
One last question: have you been allowed to speak at any conferences?
Not yet. So I was a exhibitor at a Georgia Psychology Association's a conference. I'm just starting with my professional speaking career. I mean, I've spoken at some local places, the Duluth Rotary Club. I've spoken at the American Businesswomen's Association. I've spoken at the Kiwanis Club, and I'm working on other platforms, definitely.
Fantastic. Definitely. Well, the things I've mentioned to you, I think those would be very good for you.
Thank you. And
I know I'm going to be looking for it. That's my friend.
Absolutely. And I was saying, and I will mention you because you let me know about it. So I appreciate
that.
Thank you
so much. Well, have a great evening and great afternoon. This has been very rewarding to me. And I'm just going to share. We're going to be showing this later on. And so we're just going to, I've been welcoming a lot of people. I say, you got to look at money. You got to look at money. You got to look at money. I have a very fantastic person on there. But take care, everybody, and just have a great one. And I'll be in touch. Take care.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.